One question that I've had so many discussions with colleagues, past and present, about is, would you want to be a billionaire? And a surprising number of people say no. My answer is obviously yes, duh, give me $1 billion.
What's the con argument?
The general ethical argument that billionaires should not exist. More money, more problems.
I'll fall on the sword. I will accept $1 billion.
That's very brave of you, Peter. I think I would rather have $1 billion than be a billionaire. Being a billionaire carries a sort of, it's an identity, and you are expected to comport yourself in certain ways.
I don't think, from what I'm understanding, at least, I would never want to be a billionaire who is in Washington.
Congratulations, Mr. Trump.
As Donald Trump heads into his second administration, he's surrounding himself by billionaires. The net worth of those who are set to be on his staff is over $450 billion. One big question on everyone's mind is, how does this high reward, high risk culture of Silicon Valley in particular meld and mix with Washington and its slow moving bureaucracy? And that's something we're going to talk about today. My name is Madeline Berg. I cover wealth for Business Insider.
I'm Peter Kafka. I cover media and tech for Business Insider.
I'm Derek Robertson, and I cover emerging tech and the politics of emerging tech for Politico's Digital Future Daily newsletter.
We've heard about Elon Musk. Who else is Trump surrounding himself with?
David Sachs is probably not a household name unless you spend a lot of time on Twitter and technology. He's an entrepreneur, now a venture capitalist, now a podcast host, was a big backer of Trump during the election, and has been rewarded with a sort of vague title. Basically, he's going to oversee or advise on AI policy.
I had to chuckle to myself when you said David Sachs, and I immediately thought to myself, David Sachs, of course that's a household name. And then you said, if you spend a lot of time on Twitter, and I was like, okay, I am included in this category. The first person who came to mind to me thinking about this question is Jared Isaacman, who
That's who I was thinking of too.
Yeah, Trump's pick to be the NASA administrator. Isaacman became very wealthy as the head of a payment processing company, and now is best known to the public as a sort of cheerleader for the private space industry. And he's widely expected to kind of grow the synthesis between SpaceX, the rest of the private space industry, and NASA that we've already seen growing under the first Trump administration.
And one thing I thought that was particularly interesting about him is he really has a connection to what he's doing, which I think that there are other billionaires who are in this administration who have nothing to do with what they've been put in charge with. Linda McMahon, Secretary for Education, she co-founded WWE. So that's like one where you're like, where did this come from? Is it just because of the donations?
I think we are in a post-conflicts of interest world.
Yeah.
The first Trump administration was rife with those conflicts. Trump was somewhat restrained. He's not even pretending to be, there was a whole debate the first time around about would his holdings go into a trust, and, what would, his hotel empire do outside of the U.S. and
Whether he was subject to the Emoluments Act.
all of that stuff. And Trump had learned in the first administration that he can essentially, the conflicts of interest are just ideas. I think it's worth pointing out conflicts of interest, but I don't think it's going to restrain them in any way.
Peter is completely correct. We are beyond conflict of interest because these people are essentially setting policy for fields that they stand to massively profit from.
And I think that it's important to point out a lot of this is legal. A lot of these people are not part of the official cabinet. Right. They don't have divestment policies. They don't have to report everything. So a lot of these kind of looser positions are completely legal in continuing to invest in AI as they advise on it.
There's no shock anymore. This is just the way things are. This is the way America is. And I think a lot of, wealthy people, members of various boards, it only took a little tiny nudge to accept that new reality, because as it always is for business, it's best to be on the good side of who's in power.
Can you specifically mention any policies that you think that that billionaires have their sights on that they think will really benefit not just themselves, but the American people at large?
AI is first and foremost. The sort of conventional wisdom is that we are entering an AI future, and the only issue is how is that power that AI is supposed to create, how is that going to be controlled or not controlled? That's sort of first and foremost. And then Andreessen, again, has been specific for years, saying that the restraints that sort of have built up in Silicon Valley in the last 8 years about platforms like Facebook ought to work and who ought to have responsibility for what should we learn from the mistakes of social media. And Andreessen's argument is what we should learn is to have zero regulation and sort of any sort of guardrails, and we should just go as fast as we can.
I think this is an underappreciated thing about Elon Musk, which is that he seems to have an extremely sincere belief in the idea that AI could just kill us all. But you have a diverse range of what this is going to do. The thing that ties them all together, I believe, is the belief that they are going to be the stewards of this technology, and therefore that justifies their collaboration with government in setting policy terms and deciding how these technologies are going to be regulated or not.
What about some of the non-VC billionaires that we're seeing, maybe not as part of the administration, but donating to the Inaugural Fund or, showing up at Mar-a-Lago? I'm thinking of Tim Cook. I'm thinking of Mark Zuckerberg. What do we think about this Jeff Bezos kissing of the ring?
Donating to inaugural committees is a long-held tradition in Washington. Some, like Zuckerberg, have never done that before, but it's incredibly transparent that no one is debating what's happening. They are trying to get on Donald Trump's good side. People are pointing out Tim Cook giving $1 million. Tim Cook was one of the best sort of industry leaders at managing Donald Trump the first time around.
Tim Apple.
Tim Apple, he was happy to let Donald Trump take credit for things that he didn't do or literally weren't even true. He literally stood up with him at a press conference while Trump said, "Look at this factory that Tim Cook has built because of me," and none of that was true. And then privately, Tim Cook would be able to talk to Donald Trump and make sure that iPhones were not subject to the China tariffs. And I think everyone has picked up on that and said, all right, this is the way we're going to manage things going forward. For a very long time, Silicon Valley was really disconnected from government, really saw itself as separate from government, and Washington had sort of a disdain for it. And this is East Coast, old school thinking along with New York media. We're on the West Coast, we're creating the future. We don't care what government does, we're gonna build our own thing.
Did the disdain go away, or are they more willing to work through that?
I think they still have enormous disdain for the government. I think what they've decided is we can get in there now using just sheer raw power backed by our money, created by our money, and we can reshape this the way we want. And we should do that rather than having our futures reshaped by these bureaucrats.
Legal scholars have questioned what's possible, what can they do? And a number of their suggested changes would have to go through Congress. How does the working style of billionaires, especially, I think, not only their working style, but their sense of self, clash with Washington bureaucracy?
I think that what this class of billionaires is going to discover about Washington is that Congress is, for all their, whatever disdain they may have for it, Congress is an extremely powerful institution that has an extremely powerful network of incentives that are completely different from the incentives of corporate or private governance. So that's why I think you see them focusing so much on implementing their recommendations through the executive branch, where frankly, they might be making or suggesting a lot of policy be made about subjects that, like we talked about before, Donald Trump doesn't really care that much about. So that avenue is far more conducive to the Silicon Valley mindset than working with Congress.
Do you think there is going to be backlash among everyday Americans as we kind of become more aware of the billionaires winning because they're falling in line?
Do people feel richer or poorer?
Yeah,
That's the question.
Yeah.
It's entirely dependent on economic conditions. The dynamic that we saw during the first Trump administration was that if we had one of those days where you wake up in the morning and the Trump administration is doing something that we perceive as completely outre, out of the mainstream, the next thing that followed would almost uniformly be for people on social media to note, here are all the corporations that still donate to do business with the Trump administration. Get in their face on social media and tell them that you're not okay with this. And I just don't think that dynamic is going to persist through the second Trump administration.
I want to drill down a little bit on specific industries, starting with defense. Trump has appointed Stephen Feinberg, the private equity billionaire, as the deputy defense secretary, and he has significant military and defense interests. Billionaires who have been tapped for military positions. What can we expect their approach to military spending and defense to be?
The unique conditions that I have been personally watching or keeping an eye on for the second Trump administration are the efforts among startups and venture capital funded companies to sort of supplant, or if not supplant, at least compete with the major defense contractors, the Lockheed Martins, the Boeings, by developing more sophisticated autonomous systems, surveillance systems, systems that depend on incredibly powerful AI tools. And that is the biggest change to military and defense policy that I anticipate to see under the second Trump administration.
And again, Silicon Valley has always been tied to the military and technology. Deep background there. But in recent years, a lot of people, especially ones who made a lot of noise, organizing workers at places like Google, would say, oh, we don't want Google to be involved in any part of military contracting. And I imagine there'll be much less interest in hearing from employees or customers who are angry that Amazon or Microsoft or Google is working with the military and the government. I think there just won't be a lot of room for those complaints.
I wanted to move over to health and Derek, ask you what sort of deregulation can we see in spaces related to health technology, and who are the players in the Trump orbit that will have a stake in that?
The main thing that comes to mind in the universe that we're talking about right here is Elon Musk's company Neuralink. Neuralink is such a fascinating company because it sits at the intersection of AI, health technology, privacy issues. The idea that you could put a computer chip in your brain that is then collecting, transmitting information, interfacing with AI systems that are data sinks, essentially. That is one that is immensely fraught on every possible regulatory level. And I am fascinated to see what, if any, conflicts arise if Musk uses his proximity to the administration to try to break down some regulatory barriers for such a radical technology.
Silicon Valley has been interested in health and medicine for a long time. Today, there's a ton of interest in sort of biohacking and stuff like that, right? Stuff that's on the margins of sort of traditional health and traditional medicine. But there was definitely a period 10 years ago or so where Silicon Valley looked around and said, oh, we've disrupted media and other stuff. What can we go for next? Oh, healthcare, we'll go for that. It's the kind of business we love to take on. Sclerotic, slow moving, no one likes it. We can figure out faster, better ways to disrupt this and essentially hit a brick wall.
So moving to crypto, we've seen the price of Bitcoin skyrocket since Trump got elected, and Trump has promised, among his promises, to overhaul the crypto industry and crypto regulations. What kind of policy do you think we can expect to see coming out of this second administration?
Crypto is one of these industries that we're talking about where the nascent lobbying network around it is very desperate for. They're always saying, we want regulatory clarity. Give us regulatory clarity. Put some regulations in place that allow us to operate without, fear of liability. And what that will look like in practice, I think, will be largely oriented toward transferring a lot of power for enforcing crypto regulation from the Securities and Exchange Commission to the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, which is widely seen to be a more friendly regulator of crypto for various institutional reasons. That is something that I'm looking at legislatively. When it comes to what's under the power of the executive branch as headed by Donald Trump, I think it's subject to the same deregulatory powers as that he plans to use for most of everything.
I mean, I think like Donald Trump has made pledges about making all Bitcoin mining happen in America, which is obviously not something even the US president can make happen because Bitcoin can be mined anywhere. So what I think he's really saying is mining crypto requires enormous energy. I think what he's saying is we'd like to make those environmental issues go away. But he's also talking about creating a Bitcoin reserve, either where one version is the US government actually owns a lot of Bitcoin and would they put that Bitcoin there or would they sell it off? And another version is the US government would actually go buy a lot of Bitcoin, which is just a direct wealth transfer from the US government to people who own crypto. But I think the worry from a lot of people is if crypto is way more intertwined in Americans' day-to-day life, or even if it's not involved in their day-to-day life, but just big institutions have a lot of exposure to it, and there's a Bitcoin crash, what does that mean?
Do we see Silicon Valley titans anxious about those possibilities, or are they more?
They're go, go, go.
They're go, go, go. What can we expect Congress, influenced by these billionaires and influenced by Trump, to do about taxes?
I mean, I think that the people who we're discussing would take fundamental issue with the idea that they receive any special benefit from the government. Silicon Valley billionaires think that they are giving society more than society gets from them. They think that
They think they're beyond money.
yes, exactly. Yes.
Mark Andreessen said something to that effect. He said, if you think Elon Musk is doing this for the money, you're preposterous. Now, the flip side is, I do think if you have $1 billion, you want more, whether or not you want to admit that to yourself. So they do want more money. But I think they would, if we hooked them up to a lie detector, they would say they honestly think they're doing this for the benefit of the country.
There is so much economic inequality in this country. And on the face of it, and abstractly putting billionaires in power probably wouldn't help that, and wouldn't appeal to the people that the majority of Americans who voted Trump in.
I don't know if that's true.
Tell me.
There's a lot of people who love the idea of billionaires and rich people, even though they're not rich, because they imagine they could one day be a rich person. And they admire billionaires and rich people, and they like that idea. They don't think a billionaire is a bad word.
I think there's a difference between being a billionaire and being an elite. And Americans are maybe a little more resentful of the elite than of wealth in general.
What about how is the incoming administration and kind of the billionaires that are part of it, how are they being embraced or not embraced by kind of the establishment GOP? And can you foresee any clashes there?
I mean, one interesting thing to watch, less about the GOP and more about the MAGA coalition that elected Donald Trump, is schisms there. But essentially, it's a fight between the Steve Bannon wing of the Trump party and the Elon Musk wing of the Trump party. And to boil it down, for now, Trump said, Elon Musk is the guy I'm going with on this. But that is going to be an ongoing tension between, there's a whole bunch of people who are voted for Donald Trump that have no interest in globalization. They really don't have a lot of interest in technology. And I think that's going to be the ongoing tension.
This is a question that I did not have an answer to, but I'm curious if either of you do, which is there any upside in billionaires dabbling in politics?
I think it's good for citizens to be in politics. We've always had people who have lots of money and power involved in government and policy. This version of it, where it's, there's not even pretending to be embarrassed about it, not even pretending to sort of be off stage, that's new. But I don't think it's a bad idea for people who are successful and smart to participate in government.
I agree with that. I think that it's underrated the extent to which, until relatively recently in United States history, we had much stronger guardrails against the extremely wealthy influencing campaigns. I am just barely old enough to remember that in 2000, John McCain made campaign finance reform a huge plank of his primary campaign, and it was essentially his signature issue. This was what separated him from George W. Bush, who was seen as more of an ally of the oligarchy, essentially.
And campaign finance reform meant keep the influence of money out of politics, or reduce it, or have guardrails.
Right. So if we're going to, there used to be just kind of this normative idea in American political life that it's okay for these people to participate in politics as long as we prevent them from having overweening or disproportionate influence compared to popular organization or civil society groups. That idea is gone, and do I personally think that's a salutary development? No. We're going to see what the downstream ramifications of it are in the years to come.